Good evening, Browns fans, and welcome to OBR Weekly. This is Barry. I'm the web dork. That's the legend, Mr. Freddie Greetham. How you doing, Fred?
Doing good.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. We are in the midst of Senior Bowl week as the draft prep continues and the excitement continues to grow. It'll hit a peak here in about a month and a week or so when free agency starts, and this is craziness for the next 2 months. But we are here to talk about whatever you want to talk about tonight on OBR Weekly. As you know, this show is built around your comments and your questions rather than, what Fred and I want to talk about. We want to hear what you want to talk about. We want to talk about that. So hit us up with your comments and questions, and we will go through those as we go through the program. So hit us up in the chat room, and let's rock and roll here. So, Fred, you wrote a couple of articles this week, and I want to start off talking about those per usual here. You wrote a breakdown of the offensive tackles, and, not a heck of a lot to say there. In terms of guys coming back, we've got Jeff Wills, who's a free agent now, Jack Conklin, who's under contract, and DeJuan Jones, and just lots of injuries last year at the offensive tackle position. What does this team do now to get a little bit more stability at those all-important positions?
Well, those are big decisions. If they keep the status quo, that would make the offseason a little less complicated. The biggest question at tackle is DeJuan Jones. Unfortunately, he got hurt when they could have really had like 7-8 more games to evaluate him at left tackle. And since it was cut short after a couple games, you're just that's a big decision. I'm pretty much sure they're moving on from Jed Wills. I mean, he's not going to get a long-term contract. They may offer him a 1-year return, type of a thing. But I think he sees the writing on the wall is that I think he had started his first 55 games that he was active in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
And the last game he was with the Browns, he was he was the starting left tackle. He didn't start. DeJuan Jones started.
Right.
And that was the game DeJuan Jones got hurt. But then Wills never played again. He was, his knee just was never ready. And, I'm not blaming him if he really was hurt, but he just didn't seize the opportunity. So I think they're moving on from him. He's a free agent. Another one, James Hudson, nobody ever talked about. I think I was the last question asked about him in Berea. Kind of when all the injuries happened with Wills and Jones, I asked Kevin Stefanski, if Hudson was an option because he had been on the IR for 4 weeks, and he said no. Meaning, I guess he had shoulder surgery and was not going to be coming back, but we never really got any of that. Well, he's a free agent too. That's a guy you drafted, I think, a 4th round pick. You were expecting him to maybe develop into being around a starter or something. So Jack Conklin, the good news is I think he played extremely well. It took him a while to get on the field. I think it was 6 games. He was supposed to come back like in the 3rd or 4th game, but he pulled a hamstring, and I made fun of it saying I don't even know a tackle can run fast enough to pull a hamstring, but I know you have. So when he did come back, though, in the 6th week, he graded out well and played well, and that solidified the right side enough that, when DeJuan Jones was able to come back from his injuries, they put him at left tackle.
Right.
And when Wills couldn't play and they didn't have any options, and he played pretty well. And so he was intrigued that he was going to be able to get a look at him. Maybe what a lot of the media were saying, why don't you try the guy at left tackle? And no. Well, so now you're going in the off season Do you use your draft pick to get one, or do you assume Jones is ready to take over the spot? I think
Right.
Lynn's will be restructured. He's got a big salary this year, but I think that solidifies at least this year. You got to look at a tackle. You did draft Luke Whippler as a center. You drafted
Hmm.
Zach Zinner as a guard, but you haven't really drafted any tackles and higher picks in the last couple of years. So I think free agency is an option, but I think the draft will be something they'll draft a tackle. I don't know if it would be at the second pick. It could be. I was looking at the list today. There seems like there's some pretty good tackles that could even be available at the top of the second round, or even in the third round. But they have to address that position. I don't know if you want to go in and assume Dawand Jones, besides the ability, he's finished the last 2 years on injury reserve. Now they weren't
Hmm.
kind of significant. It wasn't. He had
Yeah.
an MCL surgery the first year, and last year it was a broken leg. Um, there was concern about his weight last year, and coming into training camp, he was a little overweight, and he might, when you're 370, that's going to be a problem when you're a 6'8"
Yeah.
individual. But if he could hold that job at left tackle, that would be great because you got a young guy, he's 23, maybe the next 10 years, you're left tackle. But I don't know if they saw enough to, go with that.
Right. Right. Yeah, they have a number, obviously, of different holes that they have to fill on the offensive line. And, there's some chatter in the chat room. Fumble13 says, I want to trade down. More exciting. But, E. Gillen responds, we need more swings at bat, rebuild the offensive line in the running back room. With the number of holes that the Browns have, on the offensive line, and at running back, and sort of all over the place after a 3-14 season, all you see is holes in the roster. How aggressively do you think Andrew Berry's going to be about trading back, rather than grabbing one of those prime players at the top of the draft?
I think a lot of it comes down to what do they think of the quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
That's the position that every team overdrafts. If a guy's rated as the 30th best player in the draft, but he's a quarterback, he could probably go in the top 10. A guy like Jalen Milroe, that could be, what happens to him. Same way Cam Ward, Shadir Sanders. I looked at Daniel Jeremiah, who I respect a lot, came out with his top 50, and he has Cam Ward as the 10th best and Shadir Sanders as the 11th. But then he's got him in the mock draft he did, Cam Ward going number 1 to the Titans.
Right.
So when it's a premium position, teams shoot for it. And, I'll say this when I think about it. Browns have been so destitute at quarterback. If the guy is, even the 10th best player, but you think he can be your franchise quarterback, I mean, there's guys like Jalen Hurts who are a second round pick. We talk about drafting a guy down the list a little bit.
Right.
You take him wherever you can if he's your guy. You don't just say, well, he's ranked 10th, but I don't want to use him at 2. Well,
Right.
But you do that. You talk about best player available. With quarterback, they don't do that. So that's what it comes back to, is how they evaluate these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Andrew Berry, I saw in the interviews, he kind of went out of his way to kind of praise Shadir Sanders. He doesn't usually talk a whole lot about players. He's very nondescript. So everybody's trying to read into that. Do they really like him, or are they just trying to get people to call to trade up to get him? I
Right.
think it's a little bit of everything. So you don't want a general manager saying what you're going to do right now, unless, well, even if you had the number 1 pick, you really wouldn't want them to say, because you might be able to extract something from another team, but I really think, there's so many unknowns, Barry, that it comes down to what do they think of Shedeur Sanders? What do they think of Cam Ward, Jackson Dart, Jalen Milroe? Even if they really like, say, Jackson Dart, somebody said, if that's the guy they want, you can't say, well, we'll take him in the second round. What if somebody trades up and gets him in the first round,
Right.
So I think a lot of people, the report in the 2017 draft when the Browns had the 1 pick and the 12 pick is that, they were going to take Myles Garrett and they were going to take Patrick Mahomes with the 12th pick. Well, we all know what happened. The Chiefs traded ahead of him and took him at 10. Well, I don't think whatever it would have cost the Browns to move up to 9 or whatever to get Patrick Mahomes, I think it would have been well worth it. And I don't think anybody would remember, but the Browns missed out on him by 2 picks. Not to say they couldn't have taken him with the first pick. But see, that's what it is. There's no guarantees. If everybody knew that Mahomes would have had won 3 Super Bowls already and looking for number 4, they would have taken him with the number 1 pick, no question. No matter if Myles Garrett was the best player on the planet, he hasn't won you a championship.
Yep. Totally agree. I mean, the rules are different when you're talking about quarterback, and Andrew Berry's doing his job talking up Shedeur Sanders. Who knows if he's actually interested in him or not. But as I said last week, and Fumble 13 is saying right now, you talk up Sanders to get interest in that number 2 pick. Even if you don't like him, you talk like he's one of the best quarterbacks of all time at this point. Let's talk a little bit about the other article you wrote at tight end, because we've got a need there as well at backup tight end. Njoku obviously coming back. You hurt himself late in the season. Akins did pretty well. Got a lot of catches last year, but he's a free agent. So is Blake Whiteheart. Anybody else left on the roster never caught a ball for the Cleveland Browns last year. So they have a need at backup tight end. So what do you do, Fred?
Hey, you're forgetting Blake Whiteheart. He caught a couple passes. In fact, a 29-yarder in that one game. Jeff Swaim had a catch.
Well, they're free agents, aren't they? Isn't Whiteheart a free agent?
Yeah. They don't have. They have a couple guys on future type deals. Trey McKitty. I think he'd been in the league 4 years. They signed him right at the end, and Brendan Bates, who's on the roster, more of a blocking tight end. But yeah, I mean, I said this all along. I said it even before when they lost Harrison Bryant. If you're going to play, and if you're going to go back to more of the Stefanski offense, which most people think, you're going to need more tight ends. You remember in the early years here, he had 3 tight ends. A lot of times was playing 3 tight ends. He signed, everybody forgets that like Andrew Berry's coming out party, his big free agent signing was Austin Hooper, wasn't much of a big money, not much production, but no, I was surprised they haven't drafted a tight end like Harrison Bryant. You got him in the 4th round, you have him for 4 years on a rookie deal. And I thought they would replace him, last year in the draft. They didn't. So I felt they've been thin anyway. With David Njoku, he's been great and he's played through a lot of injuries, but he is injury prone. Last year he had a hamstring injury. I think in training camp, they kind of babied him through the preseason and it hampered him for a while. And then he was banged up, a couple other things, but he ended on the injury reserve with a knee injury. And you saw how much production dropped when he was out. You got to have more than one guy. Akins was serviceable, but I don't think he was as great a blocker as Njoku. So Akins a free agent. I wouldn't be opposed for them to bring him back on a 1-year deal if he doesn't get interest outside. but there are some free agents you could get. But I think your best bet would be to draft one. You know, I saw from the Senior Bowl, kind of intrigued me, a similar to Njoku, a kid from Miami, Arroyo. If you could get somebody like that, third, fourth round, with one of those picks, a guy that could step in, be the backup to Njoku. You get him relatively cheap, if you could turn that Cooper pick into a kid like that, a tight end. So, yeah, I think they have to address that. There's no question. I'm not saying Njoku's not old. I think he's like in his 8th or 9th year, but he's only like 28, 29 because he came into the NFL at 20. But he's got some wear and tear on him. You really need to have a second dependable tight end. And I think the draft is a better way to do that. You might sign a short-term free agent, whether it be Akins or somebody else, but draft somebody that could be brought in and be here for like 4 years, at least, kind of like Harrison Bryant was.
Right. And we have one question in the chat: any chance that Bryant returns? Because I believe he's a free agent right now. And we also have Mike D from Twitter saying, I hope we draft Harold Fannin Jr. He's out of Bowling Green, right? He's a small school, or a relatively small school kid.
Yeah, I saw Michael Keefe on our staff was really kind of, again, the Bowling Green connection. I'm sure, that favors people when they're local. I can't say I've seen him play, but I saw that Daniel Jeremiah had him higher than that Arroyo.
Right.
I haven't studied him a whole lot, but as far as, whoever they think, can help you, right away. I don't know if that's the top need on the team, unless you're going to, you could say Njoku was like your number 2 passing option. And last year, he really wasn't a factor like he was the year before because of the injuries. So if the tight end's going to be very prominent, then maybe use a higher pick and get a higher valued prospect. But you have to get some more weapons to go with Jerry Jeudy. And whether it's another tight end or another wide receiver or both, you need a little more depth at both those positions for sure.
Absolutely. But yeah, there's a burgeoning Harold Fannin fan club within the OBR that I guess we should probably tamp down so that the NFL teams are unaware of it and his draft stock does not rise too high. Hey, if you're hanging out there in one of our chat rooms or if on X like Mike D, hit us up with questions, comments, drive our discussion in the direction you want it to go. That's what we are all about here at OBR Weekly. We talk about what you want to talk about. So hit us up with comments and questions via the chat room or via X or whatever. Let's go to
I'll say
comment.
one thing on Fannin. Jeremiah has him as the 3rd best tight end and has him as the 70th overall best player, which would put him in that 3rd round,
right?
Even into the 2nd round. So he's rated higher than Arroyo, who I mentioned, who he has as the 90th, ranked player overall.
Right,
but I'm sorry, that's PFF. That's Pro Football Focus had Fannin as the 3rd, and Arroyo like behind him.
Somewhere day 2, or maybe early day 3 if you get lucky. Mike D, again from Twitter, says, I hope Juan Thornhill is done with the Browns and we draft a safety to replace him. How big a need do you think safety is in the draft for the Cleveland Browns, Fred?
Well, I was looking at the different needs, and I do think, you've took big swings at John Johnson and Juan Thornhill. You got 2 undrafted guys, D'Anthony Bell and Ronnie Hickman. You have to make a decision. Is Ronnie Hickman legitimately ready to be a starter for you? Because that would be a big thing. He played quite a bit the first 2 years because of
Mm-hmm.
injuries to Thornhill. You got Delpit. Yeah, you got other needs. I don't know. I mean, Thornhill, I think he's still under contract. I'm not sure, if his money's all guaranteed or if you can move on from him. But some of these you got to fix with free agency. You can't draft every position,
Right.
These are positions you need guys to step in and play now. And in the NFL, a lot of times rookies aren't ready at a lot of the positions. There's some positions they can, and a lot of times if they're a high first round, yeah, they step in, even second round. But if you can draft somebody at a position that they can step right in, but I don't see the Browns drafting a safety with the first or second pick. But yeah, I mean, you're spot on that Juan Thornhill is less than expectations, as well as John Johnson. I don't know if they'll move on from him or not. I mean, again, until they start making moves, it's hard to really know because they don't tell you a whole lot what they're doing, but their actions start to show, like you said, in the early part of March when guys are released or moves are beginning to take shape, then But yeah, I think you got to identify what are the biggest needs, and that's what you use your high draft picks. Positions of premium. We've seen Andrew Berry drafts cornerbacks high or every year, wide receivers every year, offensive linemen every year. So what order? I don't know. Premium position like quarterback would probably trump some of the things. Edge rusher, defensive tackle. These are all high priced positions in free agency, as opposed to trying to sign Hargrave to 80 some $1 million contract, last year. Maybe you draft Mason Graham, or the same thing, trying to get Trey Hendrickson. Maybe you draft Abdul Carter, so
Right.
this all plays into it. Paying $150 million for a guy or getting him in the draft where you get him locked up for 5 years on a pay scale, that's already built in. Those figure into their decision making. And so we don't really know, but I really do think it all comes back again to the quarterback. And if they can be aggressive and find, an answer even for a 1 or 2 years in free agency or through a trade, as I've suggested and some of the stories I've written, that would take the pressure off of having to draft a quarterback, especially with the number 2 pick.
Right. Right. Well, if they do draft safety, one of the very first things they're going to do is they're going to get him on the Core Home Fitness. They're going to get him working out and bulking up to, do his thing. We've introduced you to our friends at Core Home Fitness. They make the world's best adjustable dumbbells. Don't take it from me. Take it from Men's Health, New York Times, Best Buy, Consumer Reports, you name it. These are the guys to go to when you're looking for this sort of equipment. They make the racks, they make the inclines, they make the benches, they make all that sort of good stuff. You can find it all at corehomefitness.com, their website. They also make all kinds of videos that you can see on their website, show you how to use this material, show you all their kinds of training fitness programs that they have out there. They've got a US-based support team, fast shipping, hassle-free returns, you name it. They know exactly what they're doing. Again, check out Core Home Fitness for the ultimate in home fitness equipment. Stop schlepping down to the gym, for Pete's sake. Go to corehomefitness.com. They have stepped up to sponsor the OBR, and they rock. So there's Core Home Fitness, the sponsors of OBR Weekly. Thank you very much for sponsoring the program. If you are watching the program live and you are in the YouTube or Twitch chat rooms, always better to watch the program live 7 o'clock on Wednesdays. Jump in there and ask questions. You've got 30 years of beat reporter wisdom right here in this window next to mine to tap into here. So feel free to ask Fred his opinion on the state of the Browns as it stands in January 2025. We do have some questions here that we will get to. Uh, World's fastest fat man was very quick to get here once I mentioned the Core Home Fitness. So thank you for arriving, World's fastest fat man. A couple things happened this week down in Mobile. Andrew Berry talked to a couple reporters who flew down there and just sort of confirmed things. I think we all know that the team is very reluctant, I would say, refusing essentially to listen to offers for Myles Garrett. They want Myles Garrett to retire at Cleveland Brown. And also talking about how Shadur Sanders doesn't think that Deion Sanders will interfere in the Browns taking Shadur or any of this sort of stuff. I'm assuming that none of this is surprising to you, Fred, given what the team has been saying to date.
Well, I mean, I wrote about it in the season ending, press time with Andrew Berry, is that, he addressed the concerns that Myles Garrett had, and obviously it was to his liking that they weren't going to rebuild, and he said the right things, and he wanted, Myles to end his career here. I'm pretty sure Myles was sincere about not wanting to go through a rebuild, but I also think that it was also part of the talk, kind of to get the extension going, and I think that is well on its way. I wasn't in that briefing with Barry. It'd been, I think that's kind of a layup question. I mean, it isn't really, what's he going to say? Yeah, I'm trying hard to trade him right now, right. And I want 3 first rounds. But I mean, just if I was the GM, well, I wouldn't say it if I was the GM, but somebody said, well, I'd take that. I'd get 2 draft. Well, there'd be a lot of questions I'd want before I made that move. I want to know who's making the decision to make the trade, or to make the draft picks, because, and I want to know who I'm trading with. If I'm trading with the Chiefs, you're going to get the 32nd pick in the first round, and then the next year, probably at least in the 20s or late. Do you really think, and I'm jaded, looking at through the Browns prism, okay, let's say you get 2 first-round picks for Myles Garrett. Everybody, oh yeah, let's take that. Okay, you trade Myles Garrett and you get Jed Wills and Greg Newsome. Are you excited? That's 2 first-round picks. Right. Everybody's making it sound like you trade Myles Garrett and you're getting the first 2 picks in the draft. You're getting Abdul Carter and Cam Ward, That's not how it works.
Nope.
And so I think that's kind of a no-brainer question. I get it that you got to ask them, but wow. I mean, I just think that, I wouldn't make that move. It's like, that's one position you don't have to worry about. You can dream and hope. In all the years we've watched draft picks since 99, who has been the Myles Garrett? Joe Thomas? That's about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a short list.
And that was the 1 pick in the draft and the 3 pick in the draft. So unless you're getting like the number 1 and number 2 pick in the same year, you're not getting any guarantee you're going to get a once-in-a-lifetime player. Now, talk to me again in 3 years, maybe 3 more years down the road in Myles Garrett's career, then okay. But, I don't know how that makes you better. I know there's a lot of holes. You just got to start making better picks,
Right.
It's like we've said, they were in position to really load up from 17 and 18, and there's been so many misses in the draft, that's one of the reasons they still have holes. and to trade for Watson, there's 5 guys, at least 3 number ones and 2 seconds in there. Of those 5, I'd venture to say all 5 should be starters on the Browns, and at least 1 or 2 should be Pro Bowlers.
Right. Well, Larry Bedouin here says that he wouldn't trade past number 6 in the Raiders, and I'm with him on this. I mean, I don't want to drop past that point because I think at that point you're not going to get a couple of the players that I really want to, and you're into sort of another class of player at that point. But I agree with you, Fred. I would not drop back very far in this draft when you've got an opportunity to get a real quality player at the top of the draft. All right, let's go to some of the other questions that we have saved up here. This one from Kelly Blacks says, a lot of people connected Tommy Rees with Milroe. Are there any dots to connect Musgrave QB coach in terms of a quarterback?
I've just read some things that there was Musgrave was, I think he was a quarterback on the 49ers when Deion Sanders was playing there, and and he had a relationship with Deion, and but what it all comes down to is opportunity and what they feel is the best move going forward. I don't think it's who or I got a connection with a guy. I think with Musgrave, what makes sense is here you got a 50-something, long-term, 25, 30-year coach, former quarterback, there to be a sounding board with a rookie offensive coordinator in the NFL and taking some of those duties off his plate where he doesn't have to be the quarterback coach. And just kind of another set of eyes and ears of a well-respected NFL, coach and so forth. So as far as Milroe, I have no idea. I mean, I have to think they probably like him, but when by the time we get past the combine, my guess is he's going to have shot up where he's up ranked or he's listed as a top 10 pick by some team. Even if Sanders and Ward are taken, somebody could trade up into the top 10 to take him just because of athleticism and what he's going to show. I think he's going to probably run 4.4, 4.5. He's going to get comparisons to Lamar Jackson. It's going to be unfair to him. And, if you want to draft him, you probably would, if you think you're going to sit there and get him in the second round, you're probably crazy. If that's who you really want. Right. Just like I said before, with Mahomes, what would you have given up to go back and take Mahomes, even at 1, but even if you didn't at 1, to make sure you didn't let Kansas City go up to 10 to take him, in front of you. Oh, you might have lost a draft pick. Well, okay, you lost a lot more than a draft pick by not making that move. Yeah, but that's the inexact science of the NFL draft,
Right.
Nobody knew. I mean, using the Mahomes example, obviously the Browns, if they knew in hindsight, they probably would have taken him number 1 despite with Myles Garrett. But other teams that already had defensive ends would have traded all the way up to 1, to get Mahomes if you knew that he is what he is. So that's why the Browns are in this situation, because they just haven't been able to get that franchise quarterback.
Yep. Well, let's talk a little bit more about franchise quarterbacks. This one from World's Fastest. He says, Fred, do you think Kev and AB are more apt to try and target a high-end QB if they feel that neither is a perfect fit, or are they more apt to go after a project that fits Kevin's offensive needs?
I don't know. It's a good question. we don't really know what they believe. I mean, I don't really know if they're going back to the more traditional quarterback, or if, when they traded for Watson, it was obviously, okay, is it just because they thought this is the best quarterback available for us? And even though it's not our system, we're going to go get him and figure it out.
Right.
And if that's the same thing that they're looking at now, I mean, I would think they would have a commitment to their system. He talked about, I heard him on an interview, Stefanski, that they really believe in their system. Well,
Mm-hmm.
get a quarterback that fits your system. Don't just do a reach. And if that doesn't sound like Milrow to me,
Right.
but they don't want to, even when we talk to Reese, they don't want to commit to going back to the way they used to do it, but more of a hybrid, or, so I don't know with a wide zone, if, if they can do that with a pocket pass quarterback to do play action, or I really don't know what, I couldn't tell you what they were trying to do other than pass a lot last year.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that didn't work out. So I think they're kind of trending to go more back to the way where they had success in the past, and that makes sense. So as far as if they don't really love Cam Ward or Shadir Sanders or Milrow or Jackson Dart, beyond that, I don't know. Yeah, okay, take a Will Howard or take somebody, that you think is more of a project,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of bury him down there as your third quarterback instead of DTR, because DTR isn't really, I don't think, quarterback for this system. But then you go back and Andrew Berry drafted him. This will be 3 years ago,
Right.
back before they had Watson, and I think it was before Watson, or maybe it was that draft after that. I don't know. But the point is that I really don't know what what the fit is. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
and I think what muddies the water nowadays is the college quarterbacks. They're all more of a mobile running, you know, even guys like Dylan Gabriel and Riley Leonard, and to some degree Will Howard. They all tend to take off with their legs a little bit. You don't have just a straight drop back pocket passer anymore.
Right. If you look at the quarterbacks that Stefanski's had tremendous success with, though, Flacco, for example, you were talking about a drop back passer, taller, a guy, with a relatively strong arm, not afraid to throw into coverage, that sort of thing.
Jameis
Uh,
Winston.
yeah, well, Winston, though, sort of randomly threw the ball. He did try to throw the ball into coverage, yeah, but he didn't have the luck that Flacco had. All I'm trying to do is sort of create a comparison to Will Howard here. Will Howard reminds me of a 2 inches shorter Flacco a little bit at times, because he's with the
Well,
receivers he had at Ohio State, he definitely was throwing into tight coverage.
if you think he can be ready even in 2 years, and you can get a Derek Carr or a Kirk Cousins or Geno Smith for 2 years, okay,
Mm-hmm.
develop somebody for once. Um, we haven't seen that. We've seen him throw quarterback after quarterback out there before they were ready. But yeah, if they feel like there's something there to work with, whoever it is, Jackson Dart, Milrow, or a guy like you mentioned, I just feel like if you're really going to get, I went back to this again. Sure, there's always exceptions, but even the quarterbacks in the Super Bowl, they're a first round pick, a high first round pick, and I think Hurts is a second round pick. I think out of the
Yeah.
final 8, Hurts was the only non-first round quarterback. Okay, but you can't count, on a guy getting him in the second round that he's going to be the guy. But if you're convinced Milrow or Jackson Dart are those guys, I don't know if you can wait till the second round, because I don't know when the last time only 1 or 2 quarterbacks were taken in the first round. They usually, last year, 6 out of the first 12 were quarterbacks, you know?
Right.
So
Right.
that's what happens. And then you're
Yeah.
going, well, I'm holding to my principle. I had him as the 23rd best player in the draft, so I can't draft him until the second round or
Right.
so the next time I have a pick because I don't have a pick, there. So you get into those type things, you end up without getting them. And
Yep.
I guess my point about even if it's Ward or Sanders, if you really do have Sanders ranked as the 10th or 12th best player in the draft, and you wanted to take him in the second round or something, but you took him in the first round, well, it doesn't matter if you have somebody that can play right away, a veteran, and that's where I go back. I think their best bet, trying to get somebody for this year that can play right away. I don't know if any of these guys can play right away. Probably the closest one would be the top 2. So
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a lot of water to, and you got to sift a lot of BS that's going on, between now and the draft, and everybody's telling you this is the best player they ever saw, and they have no intention of taking them.
The only thing I know for sure, Fred, is that the Steelers don't like Jalen Milroe because the Steelers have leaked that they like Jalen Milroe. So that's the only thing I know for sure. Kelly Black says, are they a quarterback away in your opinion? So if they get the guy, if they got someone who could come in and Jaden Daniels on this team, do they go into the playoffs, Fred?
Well, they have more needs than that. I mean, last year exposed, but I don't think they're as bad as they were last year. I don't think they're maybe as good as they were the year before, but I think they can be in the playoffs. I keep harping on this. That 1-6 start with Deshaun Watson buried the season.
Yeah.
I haven't looked exactly, but let's say that was it. He got hurt. Okay, Jameis Winston steps in, and they win their next 10 games, and they finish 11-6. Did that get them in the playoffs? Maybe it did. I don't know. But you had to win every game, from that point on.
Yeah.
And we all knew the season was over when they were 1-6. And I blame Kevin Stefanski keeping Deshaun Watson in because he said it was his decision to bury the season, And I think that made the rest of the team very despondent. The defense started playing worse, and it just seemed like everything kind of caught the bug, and they're like, we're done. And they just kind of spiraled, and they played hard, but they just didn't win games, and you let that season get away too quick. And so if you had a quarterback, okay, if Deshaun Watson would have just played average, they would have won 2 or 3 other of those first 7 games. And they would have been, say, 4-3 instead of 1-6. The Giants and the Raiders should have won. You had the chance to win the game, both of them, on the final drive, and you would have won one other one there. Even 3-4. You still, could have been in the hunt instead of trading away Zadarius Smith and things like that, Amari Cooper, But I do think it don't even have to be elite quarterback play. I said it right here. If Deshaun Watson last year would have just played average, they would have made the playoffs, in my opinion. He played historically bad.
Right.
And, we saw what they could do, an offense could do with average to above average quarterback play with Jameis Winston. We all know why he was benched is because of the interception problem, but there's no question the offense was moving the ball up and down the field, and they were their own worst enemies. So there's guys that can run the offense like that are just going to make better decisions instead of throwing the ball, into the opponent's hands. And you had competent quarterback play, I think you can get to playoffs. If you're going to get to the Super Bowl, you're going to have to get to the next level like elite quarterbacks because That's who takes you there. But I do think that the team can make the playoffs with good quarterback play or average to above average quarterback play. Because I think they'll get the defense figured out and fix this offseason. I
Right.
mean, when you look at 12 takeaways the whole year, that just a lot of that is just the ball not bouncing the right way. I know Jim Schwartz and the defense, they harp on that all day long. And that in itself, only having 4 interceptions, off the top of my head, I can think of 4 or 5 they dropped right to him,
Yeah.
And Denzel Ward, as great as he is, dropped 2 or 3 of them. So you got to think they'll get that just by the law of averages up, and that's going to make a difference. But I think the defense can, get back to maybe not number 1, but top 10 with a couple key additions,
Right.
a legitimate pass rusher like a Zadarius Smith that they traded away. They're counting on Alex Wright and Isaiah McGuire to fill that, and I don't know. I would get a veteran or an Abdul Carter at the top of the draft and make sure you got that guy, or a Mason Graham, on the inside, somebody like that.
Yeah. Let's go back to quarterbacks for just a second here. The one other thing I would add to that last question, though, before we go, is in the Stefanski play action offense, you have to have a running threat. And right now, I just don't think we do. I don't think Jerome Ford is necessarily the answer, and I don't know if Chubb is coming back, but that's another question. But this is Senior Bowl week, right? So the craziness has started, and the craziness starts on day one of the Senior Bowl as they go and they measure these athletes as they come in, right? Quarterbacks maybe are not as tall as you thought they were, or the colleges said they were. And the one measurement that got everybody's attention this week are Cam Ward's hands. Cam Ward's hands aren't as big as, they thought they might be. And
I think you're talking about Jalen Milroe.
Oh, is it Milroe? Milroe?
Are you talking about the Senior Bowl?
Yeah, talking about the Senior Bowl.
That's Jalen Milroe from Alabama.
Milroe's hands. I'm sorry. His hands aren't quite as big as they thought that they would be. And so is that something that you take seriously, or something that you think isn't such a big deal?
Well, I don't know. I think it all factors into it. I know Pickett didn't have big hands, and he had a trouble hanging on the ball and fumbling when big guys are hitting him. That's one thing you really can't, change. I don't think Joe Burrow has the biggest hands, but I think they're a little bigger than, I think he's about, a lot of them say 9 inches, kind of the baseline.
Right.
And I think Milroe is just under that, but I think Burrow is about 9. I know Milroe had a lot of fumbles, but Is that because of his hand size or because he didn't secure the ball? I don't know. I remember when Hugh Jackson and those guys were dipping balls in buckets of water, Jared Goff, and in that draft, Carson Wentz. Remember they were trying to determine, when the Browns had the number 2 pick and they ended up trading it, and they were testing their hands and grip on a wet ball, and I think it factors into it, but I'm more interested is how these guys play on Sunday or Saturday in college, and and that whole thing. Sure, it's a factor, but if you love the guy, I wouldn't throw him away because his hand's a quarter of an inch smaller than what most people's are.
Right. This is the time of year where game tape sort of gets forgotten, in exchange for all this other stuff that comes out, all these other details that come out. But World's Fastest says, yes, for a guy who's seen as having some accuracy issues, hand size is the thing. And I keep hearing that hand size is the thing, given the cold weather up here in Cleveland and fumbling issues and all that sort of stuff. So maybe it's something that the Cleveland Browns will take seriously.
Dome.
Well, yeah, true. but our opponents in Cincinnati and Pittsburgh don't have domes, and we got to play there. So you got that. But anyway, Kelly Black asked, should they trade Greg Newsom? So big, massive change of topic there for you, Fred. What would you do at cornerbacks?
He's entering the 5th-year option. I think they guaranteed him $13 million, something like that. So he's going to get that. It's kind of like how it was with Baker Mayfield. Even if you really don't want to sign him long term, you got to pay him, or you're going to, if you can trade him, you're going to have to get somebody to take on that salary, or you're going to eat most of it. My thing, like my approach to almost all these type guys, same way with Jed Wills. They gave him the 5th-year option. We saw what he, for his $15 million this year, he didn't do a whole lot. But I want to make sure I got somebody. I don't think he's an elite, cornerback for sure, but he's a starter. He's in the rotation, and I want to make sure you got a better option. If you're really going to play man to man, I wasn't that impressed with Martin Emerson this year. I just thought he was more hyped. He's ready for the Pro Bowl and all this stuff. I didn't think he played that well. I don't think Newsom played that well. You got to have a shutdown cornerback opposite Denzel Ward, at least one. And so if you can trade him, if you can sign somebody in free agency or draft somebody that can step in. If you decide to take Travis Hunter, maybe then there's your cornerback and you trade Greg Newsom or you move on from him. But my approach is you don't move on until you got somebody better. I don't know what they think of Cameron Mitchell. I don't know what they think of Miles Harden, a kid they drafted last year who got hurt and didn't play a lot. They've had Khalif Halasi on the team for like 2 years, so they like him a lot. The first year never really played him, but he was on the active roster. So they got to start putting up with what they have with these guys. Do they believe in them? And if they think they're better than Newsom, move on from him. But right now, he's one of your best 3. And I don't think you move on from him until you're convinced that Cameron Mitchell's better than him.
Yeah. And I personally have not seen that, but maybe the Browns have a different opinion. We'll see. Question from early on in the chat from Kelly. Any thoughts or rumors of the Rams possibly moving on from Matthew Stafford or Cooper Kupp? Could or should the Browns be in talks with the Rams? I've not heard that one get a lot of volume. I've heard it, conjectured from place to place, but I haven't seen it get any traction. But Matthew Stafford, not sure how old he is. I think he's in his late 30s, I think. But would that appeal to you, Fred?
Well, I think there was something with his contract last year, kind of got kicked down the road to this year. So I think a lot of I saw a comment from Sean McVay that he loves him and they're going to get things worked out. So that I think was the whole idea. I'm not sure of his age either, but I mean, he would be in the mix with I would have him ahead of probably Kirk Cousins or Geno Smith or maybe even Derek Carr. But I don't think guys like that become available unless there's some major reason. Teams always seem to figure it out. If it's a quarterback, especially because they know how hard it is to get them, they end up they'd cut 10 guys if it's to keep one,
Right.
So if it's a quarterback. So I would think that if there was any possibility, that's what I was saying, is that the Browns need to be talking to everybody and seeing really what's available. When they traded for Deshaun Watson, they said they had started investigating him like in October, that year, which the trade didn't happen till March because they heard or felt like he was going to be available. These guys seem to know who might be available way before it happens. And so that's what you got to explore, every possible opportunity, because that's the only way you're going to get better. And you hear the Steelers, they're talking about that's their top priority, is getting a quarterback. So the Browns aren't the only one in this situation.
Mm-hmm.
They have to act, promptly. And that's why I threw out the trade route, because whoever it is, if you can pry a guy that somebody's not sure they want to retain because they have another option, trade for him, because unless they have a no trade clause, you can get them and you don't run the risk of losing them in a free agency bid. You can have your heart set on Kirk Cousins being released and him knowing Kevin Stefanski, but then he becomes in the open market and somebody just blows him away, a better opportunity, a better situation.
Right.
And so that's what makes this risky, especially when guys have no trade clauses, because they can force a way out of the place and then pick where they want to go, like a free agent. That's what Derek Carr has that. And if he can force his way out of New Orleans, if the new coach doesn't want him, I don't know. Kellen Moore, if he's the coach, might really like him. So I would think more than anything, that's those different opportunities kind of dry up. So yeah, you just gotta turn over all the rocks and be ready, for whatever happens.
I disappeared is what happened. I hit the back button on my browser by accident. That's what happened.
I'm on the other side now.
I know. What are we going to do? We're reversed.
I don't like being on the left.
I don't know.
There I am, back on the right.
Oh, boy. Yeah. Well, Stafford apparently is 36 going on 37 based on the answers we got in the chat room here.
All these guys, there's going to be something age-related or they wouldn't be available. I mean, I think the youngest one was Carr, and he's like 33 or 34. So Geno Smith's 35, and Cousins even older than that, or Aaron Rodgers in his 40s. So that's where you're at. But it's better than what you have right now.
That is for certain and for sure. That is for certain and for sure. Well, we are just about done here. Got a couple more questions. Let me see if we can fit anything in. Nothing that I think that we can fit in the next couple of minutes here. Fred, one more question about a guy who's might be available, depending on his situation in Minnesota. In Minnesota, you got this situation with Sam Darnold. It's a free agent looking to break the bank, potentially. You've got McCartney, the Michigan quarterback, who was injured last year. He's coming back. They spent a high draft choice on him. And they've also got Daniel Jones, right, who's scheduled to be a free agent. And now they might sign Daniel Jones. Is Daniel Jones a quarterback who interests you? Obviously, he flamed out with the Giants, but, bad situation there in general. But is he a guy of interest at all from your perspective?
I don't know. I just saw him when he played the Browns. I was expecting the Browns to just rip him up, and he came out and he was 19 to 21 and, looking really good. And then, a few weeks later, they're benching him and he's done, and you're like, I don't know what happened there. But I don't know. All I can think of, is the Sam Darnold situation. Like I said, this time last year, nobody was saying Sam Darnold is going to go throw 37 touchdowns and, and do what he did. I know it finished bad, but I cannot see the Vikings letting him get away. If he did that with the Browns, would they say, well, good luck. We're going to see what else we can find. We'll go back to square one.
Right.
When you got two good quarterbacks, those are assets. I'd have to think they got to come to some understanding with Darnold and pay him or do whatever. And even if you franchised him, for a year, because if you're going to play JJ McCarthy, great, but you don't know what he can do. You haven't seen him play at the NFL level. And I cannot imagine them just saying, well, we got lucky with Darnold, but we're going to turn him loose.
Yeah.
I think Jones would be the guy that'll become available.
Right.
And then I don't know what Stefanski and Barry think of him. He very well could be, an option they feel. He can run. He's got a good arm. It was a high pick. Maybe they think he can be the Sam Darnold here. I don't know.
Right.
But
right. It'd probably be a better situation for him than Minnesota would, where he'd probably be third on the depth chart.
Yeah. And so, one of those guys will be available. It's just I can't see, them letting Darnold go after that type of a year,
Right. Right.
Even if you signed him and traded him, it's like he's an asset. Why would you just say, okay, these quarterbacks are growing on trees, you sign him and then you could always trade him if you felt that strong about JJ McCarthy to some team, one of these other teams, and recoup, a lot.
Well, Quessy came up under Andrew Berry in Cleveland. He's certainly seen what Andrew Berry has.
There you go. He signs him
Cleveland
and trades him to the Browns.
Yeah, I'm sure that'll go great. All right. Well, as always, thank you, Fred. Appreciate your time and hanging around to answer questions and putting up with me, as always. And thank you always for hanging out with us here on OBR Weekly and for your questions and your comments and keeping us entertained in the chat room. As always, it's been fun. So we will be back again next Wednesday night at 7 o'clock to talk more NFL draft and whatever happens in Browns world on OBR Weekly. So good night, everybody. We'll see you next Wednesday.
All right, guys. Thanks for checking it out. We'll see you.